This is like signing a contract under duress. When somebody has a pistol at your head and they say, sign on the dotted line, Dave, even if you sign, that contract will not be valid, by the way. From a geopolitical point of view, it's a suicidal thing for the United States. What has Canada done since January of 2025? They've been threatened. They're going after him because they want to force a monetary policy loosening.
We're back now with Steve Hanke, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University, and what a program we have today. A lot of flashpoints and hotspots around the world we have to comment on, starting with the annexation of Greenland, perhaps. Just earlier this week, Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance met with the Danish foreign minister, and they had a constructive talk that lasted about an hour. We're going to find out what is next for Greenland. Trump is now floating a new tariff idea in a push to acquire Greenland. It would cost roughly $700 billion if this were the path they want to take to actually buy Greenland. Of course, Denmark has said it's not for sale. So are we headed for a military confrontation? And if so, what's going to happen to the economy? What will happen to the rest of South America now that the Venezuelan President Maduro has been captured? So all these points, and what's going to happen now with the Fed after the Fed Chair Jerome Powell just got subpoenaed by the DOJ. So what does all this mean, and what's next for monetary policy? What's next for Fed transparency and independence? Steve Hanke is back. Welcome back, Professor Hanke. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, David.
I want to start with a hypothetical. I know you love these hypotheticals, which is what happens if Trump really wants Greenland and Denmark says it's not for sale, and they don't, it doesn't matter how much it costs. I'll just put this article on the screen here. $700 billion, according to an article from CNBC. Here we go. Cost as much as $700 billion if we were to achieve President Donald Trump's goal of buying Greenland, according to three people familiar with the matter. Well, it doesn't really matter how much it costs if the whole place is not for sale. So what happens then, hypothetically speaking, if Trump still wants to pursue this, and NATO allies, by the way, earlier this week, just put troops in Greenland? So what's next?
Well, I think to put the thing into context, that the rationale that Trump has given for his concerns about Greenland and wanting to take it, basically, it's all wrapped up, he says, with national security. But it's a phony premise, a phony argument, because we have had treaties since 1951 concerning Greenland, and we have defense bases there. We have a license, basically a treaty that allows us to defend Greenland already. So why would anyone want to be spending $700 billion for nothing you need as far as security is concerned? So the security argument, like many arguments Trump makes, is just a phony argument. We have troops there. We have bases there. We could have more. We could have more bases there if we wanted, under treaty obligations that we've had for many years. So the whole thing is in a way, a tempest in a teacup. If you're looking only at national security, so that's the starting point, and no one seems to be talking much about that. I mean,
Minerals. So, he could want it for minerals.
Oh yeah, you could want it for many other reasons, but the one reason that he's been given is national security, and national security, by the way, is a refuge for scoundrels. Samuel Johnson pointed that out many years ago, and I've told you this on the program before. Once you get into we need to do this because of national security, it's very hard to have some kind of logical discussion then, because nothing is more important than national security, and who has all the information about national security? It's supposedly the government, not the private sector. There's no transparency. No one knows what in the world he's talking about when he's talking about national security, or when anybody else is talking about national security in Washington, D.C. We don't know what they're talking about. So there's no way an economist can get in and argue the benefits and costs of doing something if the rationale thrown up is national security.
So what is the real reason that you think, if not for national security?
I have no idea what's running through his head. I don't know, and I don't think anyone else does. If it's national security, by the way, he's very misinformed. No one's bothered to brief the guy and tell him, hey, look, we can put more bases up there, more troops up there, and so forth, and under treaty obligations that we already have that never cost us anything.
Well, whatever the reason may be, Professor, he was willing to risk disbanding NATO to acquire Greenland because he did make it very clear military was an option. Yeah.
Now this gets back to the morals. He's mentioned his morals, are governing things. Well, morals, the basic moral is cooperation between two individuals or two sovereign entities. Either one, it's basically free trade, and this is not a move that would endear anyone to cooperate. This is a threat. So he's threatening an ally, basically. Denmark's in NATO. Denmark has had, for hundreds of years, since the beginning of the United States, good cooperative relations with the United States. Now we have a president that's threatening them. He's basically, this is like signing a contract under duress. When somebody has a pistol at your head and they say, sign on the dotted line, David Lynn, that is, even if you sign, that contract will not be valid, by the way.
Yeah.
So that you have to think in those terms. This is threatening a country and telling them to sign on the dotted line with a gun at their head.
What do you think is the future of NATO? Let's start there.
Well, I think NATO is in big trouble as far as the organization goes vis-a-vis the United States. The United States is a member, but it seems to be like a difficult member right now.
Before we continue with the video, let's talk about today's sponsor, Delete Me. Most New Year's resolutions fail because they require constant effort, but protecting your online privacy doesn't have to. Your personal information, like your name, address, and phone number, is often collected and sold by data broker sites. That's why I use Delete Me, a service that helps reduce that exposure. It takes about 5 minutes to set up, and then they handle the work for you all year. They scan for where your information appears and submit removal requests to hundreds of broker sites. I've been using it for more than a year now, and they have reviewed over 325 listings to see if any data brokers have my personal information, and they continue to check to make sure it stays off. Go to joindeleteme.com/DavidLynn, link down below, or scan the QR code here and use DavidLynn, that's my promo code, at checkout to get 20% off all consumer plans. Take control of your online privacy today before somebody else does. Now back to the video. So this whole fiasco with Greenland, how does it benefit, or does it even benefit Russia and China?
I think it probably benefits both. And the reason why the reason why I come to that judgment is that Trump is basically provoking allies in NATO, and which is a defensive alliance, which I think should have been done away with, by the way. Myself, NATO shouldn't exist. After the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, after the Soviet Union fell, and the Warsaw Pact, they should have folded up NATO and gotten rid of the thing. So that's where I'm coming from on the thing. But it does exist, and they are nominally, the members are all supposed to be allies, and Trump is determined to make enemies of allies. It's like Canada. Look what just happened to Canada. Very important, by the way. Canada had all kinds of problems with China.
Yeah.
Before Trump was elected. They had one problem after another. Canada was on very bad terms. And now Carney, the new prime minister, is smart enough to make a pivot. And why has he made a pivot? Because Trump has made an enemy of Canada. And he's pivoted to China. He's been in Beijing. And what's Beijing want to do? Beijing wants to do business. And they want to do commerce, and Carney now said, well, yeah, that's not a bad idea. Maybe instead of going at loggerheads with China, Canada should be cooperating with them and trying to do business deals and so forth.
I'm all for China, Canada cooperating with other nations and doing trade and whatnot, but is that really the right move strategically? Angering the United States more, you're basically cuddling up with the primary competitor adversary of the United States right now. That's going to just further incentivize Trump and his allies to want to annex Canada. I mean, if you put...
They're not going to annex Canada, number one. That was another pie in the sky, ill-founded statement. So I think the move is wise from a Canadian point of view. Looking at the benefits and costs, I think it's wise to get out of the fight and entanglement with China and say, hey, we want to cooperate. The principle is you cooperate with people, and you go through diplomatic channels and so forth. Not this gunboat diplomacy. What are we going to do? Put ships up there and tanks at the border and point them at the Canadians and say either you sign on the dotted line and do what you want, what we are ordering you to do, or we're going to pull the trigger. We're locked and loaded. That's not those are all agreements and contracts and so forth under duress. And in the private world, by the way, all those things would be invalid.
But in the international sphere, we have guns and tanks. So
well, we have guns and tanks, and international law is different than domestic law, and that's a big the big difference is that international law is basically not followed by the great powers, including the United States. But the United States blatantly isn't following them. Even smaller powers, does it look like Israel follows international law? No. They ignore it, and they're not even a great power. So there are a lot of countries that just ignore it, whatever the international rules are. And why are the international rules set up? The international rules are set up to encourage cooperation among sovereigns. That's why the rules are there.
Professor, what happens to the economy if Trump continues to expand northward or perhaps elsewhere? Will Trump add a 51st state to the U.S.? This is from Kaushi, a prediction market. I know you like to look at prediction markets. Traders are placing an 18% chance that a 51st state will be added to the United States before January 20th, 2029. That's nearly a 1 in 5 chance that Trump's going to add something, or the U.S. will add something. I mean, it doesn't have to be Trump.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay, what will be the 51st state?
If I was a betting man, I wouldn't be in the 18 percentile. I'd be on the other. I'd be shorting that.
Okay, fair enough. What will be the 51st state? These odds aren't high. Greenland is 8%. It's up 1 now. Canada stays at 3. Puerto Rico's at 6. Interesting, Puerto Rico is higher than Canada. Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Well, yeah, but Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, and that's a long-running debate and so forth. So at least there's some legitimacy in a way to the debate and how the vote that Puerto Rico would occur not with gunboats but with votes. That's different than Canada. Canada, or Greenland. I think either one of those would be gunboats.
Well, regardless of how diplomacy is going to happen, Trump wants to acquire Greenland, which means he's going to push for all sorts of fiscal measures to be able to afford it. He's now floating, like I mentioned earlier in the introduction, a new tariff. Said Friday he may impose tariffs on countries just today if they don't go along with Greenland. We need Greenland for national security, so I may do that. The comments show. Yeah, go ahead.
This is using the threat system again. This is just threats. So he's making enemies. This is just the best thing for China in the world. All these threatening everybody and so forth. They're all going to China. Why do you think China's exports exploded in 2025? With all this tariff threats going on and so forth, the Chinese have taken the position, we have a communist regime, okay? But they've taken a free market, Adam Smith, laissez-faire approach, and they say, we just want to do business with you. We want to cooperate with you. Would you like to join us? And you can see, you're up there in Vancouver right now, and you know very well what the Canadian position is. The Canadian position has been a huge pivot, huge. And it's pivoting away from the United States and towards China. And that's what they're all doing. So all this, from a geopolitical point of view, it's a suicidal thing for the United States. Or to put it more mildly, shooting yourself in the foot.
Well, Trump wants. Yes, go ahead.
As you know, I'm a free market, free trade kind of economy, and this is just showing up not only in the fine print of the economics and the sharp penciling of balance sheets and income statements, but it's showing up big time on the geopolitical radar screen because China's winning.
Yes.
The U.S. is losing, by the way, in this.
Winning in what? In terms of trade?
In terms of influence and power. Yeah. And Canada, I'm trying to make a simple point, actually, an obvious one. What has Canada done since January of 2025? They've been threatened with tariffs and takeover by the United States, one thing after another. And what's Carney done? Carney's been elected prime minister, and he's leading the Canadians in the direction that, by the way, most Canadians agree with. Most Canadians are a little bit put off by Trump. I don't think Trump's very popular in Canada, is he?
I can't speak for everybody in Canada, but for the
just
people that I know, no, I don't think he is.
Just look at the polling data. Trump is in the tank in the Canadian polls.
Sure.
Why do you think Carney won the election? Why do you think Carney won the election? It was because of Trump.
Okay.
The conservatives surely would have won the election. Everyone in Canada that had it with the Liberals after Trudeau, 10 years of Trudeau, messing the economy up and wrecking the economy in Canada. And it looked like the Conservatives had a shoe in the election.
Yeah.
And what happened is Trump started these threats and taking over Canada and so forth. And Carney came on like gangbusters and won the election. And since then, Trump has continued to threaten and beat Canada over the head. And the Canadians have continued to take Trump down in the polls in Canada. And what has Carney done? He's done what the Canadians obviously want, and that is he's made a pivot. He said, if the U.S. doesn't want to be friendly with us, maybe we'll start doing more business and change our position with vis-a-vis China. So he had a very successful trip, by the way, in Canada, in Beijing.
Let's take a look at what's about to
By the
happen.
way, just to interrupt you, David, to make one
For
point,
sure.
you said, let me start with a hypothetical.
Yeah.
What we've ended with is reality.
Okay.
This is not a hypothetical, and Canada is the best. My exhibit number one is Canada. What does the United States gain by threatening Canada with tariffs and a possible takeover as a 51st state? And all of this stuff. The U.S. has gained nothing. They've made a big enemy, and Canada. The proof of that is that what has Canada done? They've pivoted and warmed up.
I'm just saying, if Trump wanted to invade Canada like they did with Venezuela or whatever, then who's going to do anything about that? Right? Let's say China, let's say again, this is a hypothetical. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's just if China were to get too close with Canada, and the U.S. then cites Canada as a national security concern, well, who's stopping the troops to roll up north? I don't know. Nobody.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be the Canadian military, because that's been hollowed out years ago. I think they've got a couple of patrol boats. I don't think they have any big ships.
No, definitely not.
So what are they going to do? Run the mounted police down there or something like that? It's just not going to. The whole thing is not going to happen. It's a hypothetical that it's not really worth wasting our time about. This is the kind of stuff you talk about at a bar or something.
Trump wants to. Well, okay, this is a reality. Trump wants to raise the defense budget to $1.5 trillion, up 50%. So what's he planning for? He's clearly planning for something.
He's planning for a massive amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay. The cost, the largest department in the U.S. government is the Department of Defense, and it is the mother lode for waste, fraud, and abuse. And point number one. Now, getting down to waste, fraud, and abuse, it's very interesting. He's going after the Department of Justice. Let's segue to the Fed here.
Yeah.
And the Fed. What's the latest move we've had with the Fed? Well, we have the Department of Justice going after Chairman Powell for maybe a criminal infraction, by the way, over what? Over the renovation to the Fed headquarters, which I think was built. Nothing has been done over there since they were built. There are two buildings, and I think one was built in 1931 and one was built in 1932. And nothing. They haven't done anything with the buildings, so they have a big refurbishment operation. The tab on that is $2.5 billion, and out of that, there's a 700 million of that is a cost overrun. That's 28%, and that's small potatoes by cost overrun standards in Washington D.C. and the government. Most, and I haven't done a full analysis of this, but by the way, this is one thing. When I was President Reagan's advisor, that was one of my big things was cost overruns. And so let's put it this way. I have some expertise in that area with regard to infrastructure projects. And the infrastructure projects, 28% overrun would be on the very low end of cost overruns for federal government infrastructure projects. It ranges from around 25%, the overruns up to around 200%. Now, if you get into the Defense Department and start scratching around there, not infrastructure projects, but the Department of Defense, procurement and so forth, the numbers are a lot higher. So why have they cherry-picked Powell and going after Powell when in fact, by Washington standards, the renovation project is pretty efficient. The cost overruns are only
Yeah.
I say only in quotes, by the way, 28%, which is pretty low. They're going after him because they want to force a monetary policy loosening. It has nothing to do with cost overruns. If this was the case, they'd have to be suing every head of every department and agency in the U.S. government because they're all running with cost overruns that are much higher than 28%.
What you're saying is, yes.
So that's the cost overrun thing. That's a phony premise. Just
Well,
on
what
the
you're
face.
saying is aligned with what Powell said. I just want to play for the audience who may not have seen this clip, just 1 minute of what Powell had to say about this. Take a listen.
On Friday, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas, threatening a criminal indictment related to my testimony before the Senate Banking Committee last June. That testimony concerned, in part, a multi-year project to renovate historic Federal Reserve office buildings. I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
I mean, this, I believe, was the first time he's been this explicit in what we've all suspected. But why this was very strong language for any Fed chair, especially Jerome Powell, who's been up until this point pretty tempered with his words. But why make it public? Okay, fine, he got subpoenaed. There's going to be a lawsuit back and forth. Why did he have to make a public statement, basically slamming the president, nailing him to the wall, and saying Trump has done this because I didn't want to follow his directives of lowering the interest rate? And now he's basically escalated the situation here.
I think in this case, Powell said what he had to say. He said what he had to say, and it made it very clear. So I agree with his statement. And remember, you have to put this into context for your viewers. I agree with what Powell's saying, but I want to make 2 points. One is that I have been a firm critic of Powell and the Fed's monetary policy for some time. And my most recent book that I co-authored with Matt Sekurki called Making Money Work, which came out in May, 343-page book, is all a critique of the Fed and, in effect, Powell. And the basic critique is that they ignore the quantity theory of money, and they have testified at Powell over and over again that they ignore the quantity theory of money, and the quantity theory of money says what? Changes in the money supply have a direct impact with a lag on economic activity and inflation. So I'm a critic of the Fed. I'm a critic of Powell. And I've written about this and spoken about it with you many times over the years. So that's one thing. The second thing is that there's a tremendous amount of confusion about the so-called independence of the Fed. The Fed is not an independent and never has been. And in a way, Powell actually acknowledged that when he was talking about accountability. Remember, he said they should be accountable. And I think, and I have written about this and supported it, I think the idea of so-called auditing the Fed, as they call it, is something that they should be doing. And this audit the Fed thing, it started in 2009, August of 2009. Ron Paul, the father of Rand Paul, was a U.S. congressman and a friend, and he put in something called Audit the Fed. It was House HR 1207 was the bill, and it actually passed by 327 to 98 in July of 2012. Now, it died in the Senate, so nothing happened. But on the Senate side, Senator Rand Paul, introduced in 2015 for the first time an Audit the Fed bill. It was called the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, Senate Bill 148. And that again was Audit the Fed. Now, what is Audit the Fed? What do these things really want to do? It gets way beyond auditing a balance sheet or something like that. It's auditing their policies. Why are they, for example, they would ask questions like, why are you rejecting the quantity theory of money that Hanke's been proposing and been writing about with security in this book, Making Money Work? That would be the kind of, they'd audit the policy and all the activities of the Fed. And I'm for that. So but that's something different than a criminal indictment and investigation for a cost overrun on the renovation of buildings, Fed buildings that are over 100 years old and have never been renovated before.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? So there's a big basis to be criticizing the Fed and Powell, but the cost overruns, I don't think is one. Because
Okay.
if that was the basis for this, you'd have every head of every bureau and agency and department in the U.S. government under criminal investigation, because they all are running massive cost overruns that are much greater than the renovation of the two Fed buildings that they're talking about. So it's a ruse, and it's trying to force the Fed to loosen up on monetary policy, which I think would be a bad thing, because the inflation numbers of the new one for December just came out, 2.7 CPI headline inflation, the same as it was in November, 2.7. And what's the target? The target's 2%. The 2% is a lot lower than 2.7. And I don't think this loosening will allow the Fed to get back the genie of inflation back in the bottle and get down to the target of 2%. I think that's the real problem. And that's going to be a big problem for Trump, because they are loosening, by the way. The Fed funds have been going down. In December, the Fed switched from quantitative tightening and shrinking the Fed's balance sheet to expanding it. They said they were going to buy $40 billion worth of T-bills, and they've started doing that. They're well into it. I think they've already bought over 30 billion. So they're monetizing the deficit as they were doing in 2000 and 2001 after COVID hit, and they were monetizing over 90% of the deficit then. And that when we monetize the deficit, that increases the money supply. You increase the money supply, and sooner or later, what happens? You're going to get more inflation. And some bank regulations that I think they should get rid of, they're getting rid of in April, will give the commercial banks a lot more firepower, because they'll have excess reserves, and they can, if they have bankable projects and they want to extend credit to those, they'll have the ammunition to do so, and that will increase the rate of growth in the money supply, because commercial banks produce most of the money. So everything is going. This is a pivot that the listeners should be aware of. The Fed has pivoted away already from tightening monetary policy and getting the inflation down to the target of 2%. They have gone from that tightening mode to more loosening mode. And I think that loosening mode will continue. And that's what Trump wants.
I know you said that things like energy contribute to relative price changes, but I just want to bring up the fact that Trump says Venezuela will be turning over up to 50 million barrels of oil to the United States. In theory, this could flood the supply, bring down WTI, or at least just prices at the American gas pumps. Would that help with stabilizing inflation somewhat, Professor?
No.
No.
Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. You got where is the money supply going? What's the level of the money supply? That determines the overall inflation rate. And no matter what aggregate you use, whether it's core CPI or PPI or CPI or whatever, their whole plethora of aggregates, measures of price indices, and all of those move around when the money supply moves around.
By the way, what do you think of the proposal that Trump made last week about the banks and credit cards? He wants to put a 10% cap on credit card rates, possibly as a way to to fight affordability, the affordability crisis in the U.S.
Well, he's taking a page out of the Democratic Socialist playbook of the New York Mayor Mondami. This is just price controls. And by the way, a 10% cap would essentially screw many people that have credit cards, because those credit cards would be taken away from them.
Yeah,
it's a classic case. If you have price controls, the supply of whatever the controls are dries up, and the banks have made it pretty clear that that's going to happen if he puts this cap on. So it's a dumb policy. It's a Mondami socialist kind of policy, or as Trump would call it, a communist policy.
So I guess we can finish up by asking you about what's going to happen to assets when inflation goes up. So your view is now inflation might heat up because the money supply is now, going up like a hockey stick. Well, gold's already at almost $4,600 today. Silver's at 90, or just was at 90. Any other hard assets you think would do well in this environment?
Yeah, platinum is making new highs. Copper is making new highs. All the commodities are going to go up, and we have definitely a bubble in the stock market. Moving over to the stock market, David, but in any way you measure it, we have a bubble. So the question is, well, when do bubbles pop? And the only thing we know for sure that with regularity is that bubbles if there is a bubble, they tend to pop if monetary policy pivots and starts tightening. And as we've just said, what did I say? It looks like the Fed is pivoted towards loosening. So that means the popping of the bubble, the standard kind of popping, doesn't look like it's in the cards. It looks like the bubble is going to stay there, maybe get bigger. So that there we have an investment advice based on what it looks like the monetary policy is going to be in the quantity theory of money supply expansion. That's good for hard commodities. So it keeps the secular bull market going in gold, silver, copper, platinum, and other things, even things like lithium. Remember, lithium got bombed out, and it looks like it's bottomed out and it's going up now. So that's the commodity thing. Then you say, well, Hanke, you've been complaining and warning about the bubble in the stock market now for a year or so, and you've been writing about it, and you won't tell us when it's going to pop because you've told us that it's impossible to know when it's going to pop. Well, I've been thinking about the popping part of the thing for a long time. And the only thing we know is that bubbles pop when monetary policy tightens. And I've now come to the conclusion that with all this pressure Trump is putting on them, the Fed is pivoted towards loosening. And that means that the stock market bubble will probably stay with us.
Anything you're outright bearish on for 2026?
Tilting. I'm staying pretty bearish on oil.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, it doesn't really work into this Venezuela thing. Although if Venezuela starts producing more, that is a bearish aspect. But the key thing is the incremental demand in oil, no matter what forecast of oil demand you use, can be easily met by non-OPEC plus producers. Point number one. Point number two, OPEC producers have a hell of a lot of excess capacity. And point number three, the inventories are pretty much filled up every place. Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of inventories around. Non-OPEC plus producers can meet the demand, incremental demand for crude, and you have a lot of spare capacity in the OPEC plus producers. So it's all everything looks pretty bearish, but there are things that could happen, and one thing that could change that scenario is if the U.S. and Israel go to war with Iran. They're clearly, I think they will shut the Gulf of the Straits of Hormuz, and the Gulf production of oil would be cut off from the world. Now that would change the bearish picture, by the way. The Gulf produces a lot of oil.
Right.
And if they can't sell it and get it out of the Gulf, the supply demand picture changes dramatically.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that also impacts trade as well, and potentially markets.
So there are things that could come into the picture. I think they're low probabilities, but non-trivial and something worth paying attention to. So I'd say my base case scenario for oil would be bearish, but there are things that could change that base case scenario, and I just gave you one of them.
Thank you very much, Professor. Let's leave it here today. We will follow up next time. Don't forget to submit questions to Professor Hanke. If you'd like for the next episode, we can put his email down below, as well as my own. And some of you have already been doing that, so thank you very much. And also comment down below.
We've been responding to some of these are highly technical and almost not suitable for podcast, but rather a graduate seminar room or something like that. And David will attest to the fact I answer all these things.
Yes, that's right.
These technical questions, and you copy in. If you write, copy in David Lynn. So Lynn and I are both on the same page, and I respond. And you can follow me on X at Steve_Hanke. And by the way, speaking of oil and Venezuela, we didn't get into the weeds on Venezuela too much, but they do have the highest inflation in the world. I'm measuring it every day.
Yeah.
And it's running over 800% per year. Inflation in Venezuela right now.
We didn't talk too much about South America. We got hung up on Trump getting hung up on Greenland. So we can save that discussion for the next episode. I like to see if there's more developments. Basically, he's threatened the entirety of South America. So we'll see what happens. Let's close off here. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, he's basically threatened Mexico. He's threatened Colombia. Yeah.
His modus operandi, it's not cooperation. It's threats. So how does that work? Either you do what I want you to do, I command you to do, or I'm going to pull a gunboat in there and I'm locked and loaded. That's kind of what's happening. But think about it in terms of private cooperation. What happens with a private contract? If you go in to a room and there's a private contract in front of you, and the person on the other side of that contract is holding a gun at your head and tells you to sign it, you would be signing under duress, and that contract would not be valid.
Yeah.
That's how to think about these things. You got to get realistic. I'm a realist. So
I wonder if it's the U.S. versus the entire world now.
yeah, right.
If that's the kind of world we live in today.
That's the kind of world we live in today, and the reason that it's happening is because the United States is basically ignoring international law.
Well, let's leave it here. So yes, follow Professor Hanke down below. We can continue that conversation next episode, and I do want to put you on a panel with Mark Skousen, so that'll be fun.
Oh yeah,
but
that'd be great.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, and yeah, don't forget to write us and follow Professor Hanke. Links down below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well.